Michelle Marie McGrath.
Hello and welcome to Unclassified Woman. For today's episode, I'm delighted to be talking to the lovely Randi Buckley, and that's Randi with an I. Randi writes and coaches emotionally aware, deeply contemplative women towards finding their truth with depth and beauty, with life's big questions and sticky situations. She is the creator of Healthy Boundaries for Kind People, the Viking Woman Workshop, and Maybe Baby, for women who hear the whisper of maybe in their hearts. And you can find Randi at randibuckley.com. Now, I really enjoyed this conversation. We talked about the nature of ambivalence, which is something that many women experience in relation to the possible adventure of motherhood. So really love to hear your comments and what you think about this. I found it really interesting. So, hi Randi, so happy to be speaking to you today and really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
No, you're so welcome. I've been looking forward to talking to you about this for a long time. So, as you know, the purpose of the podcast series is to inspire and uplift women for whom having biological children is more than likely not going to be a part of their future. So they may not have kids due to their personal circumstances. It may be a choice. It may be by chance. And as we know, one of the common themes that arises for many is all about feeling ambivalent.
Right.
Yeah. So, which it's such a massive topic and one that you explore in the work that you're doing with Maybe Baby. And so I really wanted to talk to you about this today because I know that you've really examined this and you've gone through ambivalence yourself before you had your child. And obviously it just brings up so much for people. So yeah, I know that when I was looking at your sort of bio details, I noticed that you felt very ambivalent for a long time before you then decided to have your son. So how did that kind of all come about for you, that you made that choice?
Right. I actually made that choice when I was probably about 6 or 7. and really being a child of the equal rights movement for women in the United States. And I, in my mind, really equated having a child with not being a feminist.
Yeah.
At least that was part of it. And it also probably, I have to admit, it was probably something that got a lot of attention when I would say, announce that at family meals or things like that. But it was something I also really felt strongly about as I grew up. And then even when I met my husband, I really was, I think my tag, the thing I used to say was, I'm happy to be the rich, eccentric aunt, which makes me go, okay. But I never saw myself as a mom. I helped run a summer camp. So I love being with kids, but to me, you didn't have to be a mom in order to be involved in kids' lives.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that you felt that it was kind of contra being a feminist, because I suppose there's been so many shifts and things, that have been developed in the name of women's rights and the ability to choose and have so many different options in our lives that, you can see how women feel overwhelmed and feel like some may feel they have to make a choice, whether it's one thing or another. Do they focus on their career and relationship, or do they think, I'm going to throw myself into having a family? So I can see how, because obviously it is hard work juggling all of that. It's not easy. So did you feel that, well, if I have a child, I'm not going to be able to do all the other things I want to do?
I for a long time, I didn't think about it, actually. And then when I started getting to the point where I started hearing these whispers of maybe, that was absolutely horrifying to me, because I suddenly felt like this hypocrite. And I went from this place of really not wanting to have a child to, that was more of the shift into ambivalence when I started thinking, what is it? What is all this about? So some of I think, and I was with that for a couple of years, and I did not tell a soul because I was so not ready to admit that to myself. Yeah. And a lot of the women I've worked with, actually, it's in reverse. They've always wanted to have children. All of a sudden they get to this point of, oh, whoa. Maybe not. And I think some of the ways of being with ambivalence at that point are similar. And let me just say, Michelle, that I think if you've ever been ambivalent, that will remain part of your equation.
Yeah.
So I think so often people are looking for this perfect moment of clarity, and they want to hear bells ring and just know what is true for them, because we have heard so many people say, oh, I've always wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and they've always had this knowing. And I think if you've ever had some ambivalence will be part of your equation and part of your answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's confusing, isn't it? Like, it can be. I got married at 25, and so, of course, I'd moved to the other side of the world to be with my partner, and I remember at the time thinking, I'm not even going to think about having kids or family at this point, even though obviously our families were asking. Right. And I thought, God, no, like, I'm way too young for that. Like, it's just not even entered my head that we'll be embarking on that while in our 20s. And then as time ticked on and it got into like my early 30s, I still thought, yeah, I'm just, no, not yet. Oh, it's not the right time. No. And I just had this massive resistance. And then I remember getting to my mid-30s and then, and thinking, wow, okay, well, we've been together for 10 years now, and if I'm not open to this still, maybe it's just not right for me. Right. And I think part of me knew that it wasn't right with my ex-husband, and I was in denial about that as well. But sure, it was just this thing where I thought, like you said, I thought, well, does anyone ever come to a point where they 100% go, yes, absolutely? And I thought, well, look, for some people, they are just clear always that that's part of what they want. Definitely. They just think, well, I do want to have a family. And sure. So for them, I guess it can be more straightforward in their mind in that way. Right. Whereas I guess I was very conscious of the fact, look, this is just one of many options for my life. And I'm pulled in so many different directions to so many things I'd love to explore and experience. And while I can see that would be a very amazing experience, it again, in my mind, because you can't imagine what it's like to have a child before you've had the child. Right. I'm sure, so it's just that constant sort of wavering and going from one direction to another. And like you, I could really see, the great things about that as well. Right. The fact that it's also incredibly challenging. And I did au pairing when I was in my late teens and looked after a 9-month-old baby and a 2-year-old. And I just remember this massive shock of never being so tired, because I had the baby in my room and so I was feeding her. So I just remember thinking, I've never been so exhausted, and that was just for 4 or 5 months. Can't even go to the bathroom without having a crowd in with me and stuff. So
I went in for when I went into labor. I went to the hospital and I ended up having an urgent C-section, and everything went very well. But I remember thinking, really? Wait a minute. Wait, really? We're going to do this? And so even at that point, and thank goodness in my case that the body had 9 months to prepare, not just physically, but mentally, there was still this, feeling of, oh, okay, wow, really? So yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. And so when you then obviously decided that, okay, yep, I'm going to do this. How did you feel kind of during your pregnancy? Were you still, did you feel kind of completely sure around that then that, yep, this is the right thing for me, it feels right? And did you have any doubts? So it just then felt like it was the right time and it was the right decision.
Well, I set myself and I put myself through this process, which I then have kind of replicated in Maybe Baby was really my own process of trying to figure that out. And what I got to at the end of that was not a complete absolutely or no way, but it was, okay, I'm going to open this window and give it a chance. So for me, it was this never, standing declaration on the mountain of this is what I'm going to do. But I got to the point of saying, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
I am leaning into yes quite heavily. And then so I said, to some degree, it's going to be see what nature has to do here.
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't remember the second part of your question, but I never actually felt like, all right, your pregnancy. I was really freaked out. And I had incredible morning sickness, which did not help me feel like I wanted to completely embrace it. But at that point, I was definitely committed and into it, and was starting to get excited as time went on. I was excited and terrified when I found out I was pregnant. But like I said, good thing the body takes 9 months plus, unless it's 10. I didn't even tell. I was 37 during all but the last day of my pregnancy, and
Wow.
I didn't tell my parents until I was almost 6 months, because I still felt like I was 14. Going to say I'm pregnant, and they were very excited, but I was not there yet, and they understood that, which was good. But no, it took a little while.
And so, what were some of the kind of beliefs that came up for you during that process? Because obviously there are a lot of those things that we hear about of like, well, my life won't be completely fulfilled unless I have this experience of having a child and leaving a legacy in this way and all that kind of thing. I mean, when you were sort of exploring about, okay, I'm leaning more towards a yes, did you have because, and then sort of beliefs that would come up for you to kind of explore during that process?
A little bit. One thing I did is I sat down and wrote down every belief I had about motherhood or childbearing.
Yeah.
Then I sorted them out, and I can tell you what some of them were. And I said, okay, which ones are actually mine?
Yeah.
Right. And I found that, and I have women do this in Maybe Baby. I found that a lot of the questions I was carrying or beliefs were not actually mine. They were things that were either society driven or comments people had made to me, all sorts of things. So what was really helpful with that was to be able to parse out what I needed to work on and look at to see what was really mine. And for me, I was really fortunate, and I never had I won't have a fulfilled life unless I have a child. That was not me. I just thought it would be a different life, but it's already fulfilling.
Yes. Yeah.
Not suddenly going to shut down. And I think women can absolutely have a fulfilled life. It's just a different life.
Yes.
So for me, really parsing out what those beliefs were was really key. And what I really found out was one of the beliefs I had that I didn't want to be a mom was actually I was scared of infants.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I realized, okay, well, I learned to drive, so I can probably learn what to do here. Wasn't born knowing this. I loathed babysitting when I was a kid. I would always get out of it if I could. I just could not stand it. And I did not know how to take care of small children. And that really, infants completely freaked me out. And I had to trust that I could learn that.
Yes.
People have. And I saw that actually that was the part I was concerned about. Teenage angst, I'm all over. I've got that. Having been one, I can work with that. So that was one that was really big for me. And I also, a belief I held was this was going to almost homogenize me into all the things I didn't want to be. Oh. And that was also not the case. And I started looking for role models, women who not necessarily were that I wanted to be just like, but women who I admired for mothering in a way that worked for them.
Yes.
And that was really, really helpful for me. Some of them I didn't know, some of them I did know. And I could see that I don't have to do it in the way I think is not me. I don't have. And it's interesting because when I've worked with clients on this, a lot of them will get to the point and they'll say, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I don't want to drive a minivan and have to hang out with these women at soccer practice. And I said, I am so glad you named that because you don't have to. But for them, that was all part of this big ball of wax of what motherhood would be. And and I'm thinking of this one person who I had this conversation with, she's a very vibrant renegade artist in New York City. And she thought that that would change, that she would not be who she was, and she'd be stuck in a minivan on Wednesday afternoons.
Yeah, and I guess as well, what we have a tendency to do is we kind of look at some of the judgments and the beliefs that we have about our own mother, and like you say, other examples of mothering in our family, and we think, I don't want to be like that, you know.
Yes.
So it definitely has a massive impact, and obviously our own childhood and stuff has a huge impact on those sort of those beliefs as well. I mean, it's unavoidable, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, what would you suggest to somebody who is really in that place of ambivalence and feeling confused and on the fence and not completely in one direction or another? Like, if they're trying to get clear, what do you believe is like a great first step?
The very first thing I would say is it's so okay to be ambivalent.
Yeah.
And ambivalent might be, and this is actually somebody else's quote. I can't remember whose it is, but she said, who I interviewed, she said, Michelle Lisenberry Christensen, that was it. She said, to her, ambivalence is a mark of sanity.
Yeah.
And I loved that. So I would say, the first thing I would say, it's okay to be ambivalent, and how can you be more comfortable in your ambivalence? And then I used, and what I do when I work with women is then use ambivalence as the entry point into the question, because I think we often have judgment about ambivalence.
Yes.
And that gets in the way of going into the conversation. That serves as a little bit of a wall, and then we just got to get stuck there because, I'm ambivalent, and just, I'm going to hang out here. And it actually starts to serve, or it could start to serve as a distraction to the bigger questions there.
Yeah, and it can just be like a call for more information.
Absolutely.
So what is it that I need to, I suppose, investigate within myself or question myself on, just so that I'm like a step clearer in either direction, whatever that is. And also, I know a lot of the things that we hear, like, and my mum said this to me, because, you know, my mum was always really clear that she wanted children, and she's also done childminding. And she said to me so many times, I just think it's such an amazing experience, and I would hate you to regret that later on. I'd hate you to regret not having a child when it's too late, you know. Right. And so I'm like, well, yeah, but to me, that's not a good enough reason to force ahead with a situation or an experience if it's something that I don't feel a strong enough pull to that. So, I mean, what do you suggest in that kind of scenario? Because I think that's quite a common thing that people get told. Absolutely. You know, you'll regret it. You know, well,
you'll change your mind.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. When you meet the right person, you'll feel differently. You know, all of these things, who's going to look after you when you're old? You know, like, there's just that whole gamut of these sort of statements that are trotted out.
Absolutely. And boy, have I heard a lot of those.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, particularly when there are people really close to you, like your mom, is to separate what she's saying from why she's saying it.
Yeah.
And in that case, it sounds like your mom just wants to make sure that you have a happy life.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's her idea that children can provide that, but ultimately she's wanting you to have a happy life, and that is ultimately what she wants.
Yes, yeah.
So I think if you can start to separate that, that's really helpful. I think it's really also helpful for people to have what I call a cocktail line, and that is a response ready to go.
Yes, yeah.
So that you don't feel like you freeze in that moment or you go into rage. You have something that is you can pull out of your back pocket, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it honors you, it honors them, and you can move on to something else. And it might be, thanks for your opinion. I'm not even at that point of discussion yet. Or you can, mine was that tongue in cheek, I'd rather be the rich eccentric aunt. To have something like that, just so if you don't want to go in that conversation, you don't have to. Yeah. You can have really healthy boundaries around that.
I mean, it's I suppose it's one thing when it's complete strangers who feel, they've got every right to have an opinion and pass comments, and then it can be very difficult when it's close family members or close friends.
Yes.
Because it's just such a charged subject often, especially depending on your family dynamics and all of that sort of thing, which can be very, very difficult for people.
Yes.
I've heard, so many times of that with clients whereby, especially if they come from a very traditional family,
Mm-hmm.
when it's kind of so alien to them. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean you won't have a child? And, what do you mean we're not going to have grandchildren? This whole sort of thing, which is just can be extremely challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I interviewed an Iranian woman, and this about her, what I call maybe baby question, and she was very clear she did not want to have children, and this was unheard of to even have this thought in her family, and it pushed, it was really challenging, not just from regular family dynamics, but from this added layer of a cultural one as well.
Yeah, because then it just feeds into that stereotype again of like, well, what's wrong with you? Like there must be something wrong with you.
Exactly. And I think it's important that women don't take on thinking it's their duty to make somebody else happy, to make somebody else's life fulfilled. Because when somebody's saying, oh, I'm not going to have grandchildren, or I really want to have them, or something like that, basically that person's putting the onus of their happiness on you.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
No.
And they need to take some responsibility for that.
It can be emotional blackmail. It can feel like,
Yeah.
I mean, and as you say, like it's like not every woman is born to be a mother, and purpose of fulfillment, meaning comes in many different ways, and only each woman can decide what that is for her. And we get so kind of swayed often by other people's opinions that, like you say, it's really important to keep coming back to, well, what feels true for me right now. And I guess with the whole like ambivalence topic, you might feel certainly one way one day, and then over time or in the next moment, you could feel completely different.
And that's and in my process would be before I was leaning into yes, when I was in that phase of gosh, maybe, but I'm not going to say anything to anybody. What I would say to people when they would bring it up is, I don't think motherhood's right for me, but I'm going to reserve the right to change my mind.
Yeah.
And just kind of done. And I also needed to be able to say that to myself. Because I also feel like going into the conversation, we also feel that it's so black and white of once I decide, that's it.
Exactly. There's no changing my mind. There's no, sort of going back. I've said for all these years that no, that's not what I want. And how can I now change my mind and go, actually, this feels right now?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's again being okay with our own personal choices, which that's one of the biggest things in life, isn't it? That not seeking the external validation and acceptance from elsewhere, that coming back to we're okay where we are and with our own, just really making sure we're living our own life and not pandering to the will of, family and friends, which can be difficult not to be influenced.
Absolutely. And I would also add, I think we're so often of disappointing the person we used to be. And so that is almost like this extra, your past or even different phases of your past life of what you had said or done. You don't want to betray that.
Yes.
And I think that's, and for me, that was ultimately what I got to was I don't want to let who I was, which was very true then, determine what I want now.
Yeah.
And that was really where it shifted for me. So even with family and, what would be possible in career and all of that, it was a huge part of, for me, a huge part was not wanting to betray the person I used to be.
Yeah. And it's that thing, isn't it, of bringing like all of your awareness into the present moment and thinking, well, how do I feel now? Like, obviously the past is where I've been. I don't need to stay there if it's no longer true for me.
Yeah. And it wasn't wrong. It's just things
Yeah,
have changed. Mm-hmm.
that's right. And so, I mean, we're at such an exciting time, I think, as women. And yeah, we've got so many choices, so many options. Like, it's understandable that it can be very overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a surprise that we can feel very confused and ambivalence can be there. So how can we support each other more in moving forward and respecting and encouraging each individual's choices, do you feel? Because that to me feels like that's really kind of key for where we're at now, and really
Mm-hmm.
closing that gap and bringing like more understanding to what's right for me is not necessarily right for you, and probably isn't.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is compassion.
Mm.
Compassion for that. This is a really deeply personal, probably the biggest question some women deal with in their lives or look at. And then also compassion for different roles. Women who aren't moms being really compassionate for moms, and moms being compassionate for women who are not moms, in all those variations, really appreciating how we can support each other in those different roles, and we don't have to all be on the same team in order to, I don't even want to say team, but all, that's not what makes us a team.
Yeah.
Of all being on that, having the same biological destiny in terms of our reproduction. I think compassion is wildly huge, and not thinking that it's selfish either way.
Yes, yeah. I mean, oh my goodness, that's so, overused, isn't it, as a word? Jeez.
Oh my gosh. And you know how I feel about this. I think it's selfish to think somebody else should do what you want them to do just because you want them to do it. It's yeah. But I think compassion is really huge, and compassion for how you use, and for yourself, how you used to feel. If somebody, often women and maybe baby have had past abortions, and they'll come to and say, how can I think about having a child now when these were my choices and what was right for me in the past? And we go back to compassion. You did what was right for you at the time. You're looking what is right for you now. Yeah. And I think the more we can call out BS when we see it on, often I think media hyped up moms versus non-moms.
Yeah.
The better, and really appreciate, like I said, the roles, and have each other's back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way Melanie Notkin, who is the author of Savvy Auntie and Otherhood, she talks about closing that gap between motherhood and otherhood, and which I think is so spot on. So I think that's really going to be like part of our next phase, isn't it, within society, and how women support other women.
Absolutely.
And really kind of valuing all the different qualities that we all bring and share, and different gifts that we bring. And like, obviously we need mothers who are really supportive in doing their role that they're doing, and then we need people who are not, to focus on other areas.
Absolutely.
So, okay, Randi. Oh, well, that's fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about the Maybe Baby course, and when your next intake for that is, for anyone that would like to, know more about that?
Sure. Maybe Baby is a 6-week course that I put together, and it's currently available self-study. I was actually very resistant putting it together self-study, but a lot of women were unwilling to talk about it. They just had to be with themselves, and I wanted to honor that. And I've had several hundred women around the globe do Maybe Baby now, and the whole idea is to find what is true for you, and then be at peace with it. So sometimes that means being able to articulate what you feel, really getting to the heart of the matter for you, but ultimately finding what's true for you, regardless of what that is. And so that self-study is available on my website. I also work with women one-on-one who want to explore that with a higher level of support. And then I also do virtual retreats where we get about 5 women together. and we do a maybe baby retreat over the weekend. So
brilliant. And
yes.
So what's your URL, Randy? What's the best location for people to find you?
It's my name, randibuckley.com.
Yeah.
And it's Randi with an I. And that's how you can find me there.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today and your valuable insights. I can just kind of explore this topic all day, really.
Yes.
There's just so many nuances to it. Mm-hmm. But thank you. Thanks so much for the valuable work that you're doing.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.